Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Education Decision Meeting. My name's Susie Horton. I'm the Cabinet Member for Education. A little bit of housekeeping, safety information, although I think everyone in the room has been here before, but I will go through it in the interest of safety. If the continuous fire alarm sounds, please evacuate the room by the stairwells. Do not attempt to use the lifts, and assemble in front of Queen Victoria's statue in Guildhall Square. In order to comply with the Guildhall Trust fire marshal regulations, please remember to sign out when you leave the building after today's meeting if you've signed in. This meeting is live web streamed, and I will draw everyone's attention to the fact that this meeting will be live streamed from a camera at a fixed location at the back of the meeting room, and the recording will be on the Council's website. Members of the public are also permitted to record the meeting on the understanding that there are no members of the public here, that it doesn't disrupt the meeting, nor records those stating explicitly they don't want to be recorded. So finally, may I ask everyone to use microphones provided when they're speaking, and I'm going to ask everyone to introduce themselves. So we'll start on my left.
Councillor Tom Coles, Labour Group Spokesperson.
Thank you.
Alison Edgerton, Group Accountant with a responsibility for schools.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Angela Mann, Finance Manager for Children's, Families and Education.
Lisa Gallagher from Democratic Services.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. So the first item on the agenda is apologies for absence. Are there any other apologies? There's an apology from and a statement which Councillor Terry Norton has sent in, which says, as well as my duties as a councillor and group spokesperson for education, I'm a full-time teacher requiring me to be at school during school hours. Meetings are usually at 4 p.m. as previously agreed, so I regret that I'm unable to attend today's meeting. So obviously we'll record that absence. I just want to clarify that most of the meetings that we have are at 4 o'clock for that reason, and also for Councillor Coles. Similar circumstances with work, but this one was always going to be at this odd time, because normally, actually today I work at the university and I've got leave of absence from the university because there's a deadline tomorrow for the DFE, and it couldn't be at 4 p.m. As there is a T&T meeting, Traffic and Transportation meeting at 4. So apologies to Councillor Norton for this unusual time for this meeting. Okay. And we have some other people who've just come in, so I will allow them time to at least sit down. Okay, who's going first? Introductions.
Julia Catherine, Head of Inclusion at Portsmouth City Council.
Welcome.
And Alison Critchley from Portsmouth City Council.
Welcome.
Mike Stoneman, Deputy Director, Education, City Council.
Welcome. Okay, so we've only done apologies, so we're now on to declarations of members' interest. I am on the governing board at Craneswater Junior School.
I'm a member of the Academy Advisory Board at Penhale Infant School.
Any other declarations of interest? No. Well, without further ado, we shall go on to item 3, which is the Dedicated Schools Grant Budget 2020 to 21. And
This report encompasses the budgets for the Schools Block Dedicated Schools Grant and the Central School Services Block, which were agreed in January, and it also includes details on the High Needs Block and the Early Years Dedicated Schools Grant Block. These proposals were endorsed by Schools Forum on Wednesday the 12th of February. In terms of the general picture of the high needs funding for 2021, we have increased top-up rates for special schools, inclusion units and alternative provision, and these are shown in Appendix 3 and Appendix 4, and it's to give them a similar amount of increase as what the minimum funding guarantee has given to mainstream schools for 2021. We've set budget for top-up funding based on current information and trends for mainstream funding for schools, and this allows for an increase in costs and numbers compared to the 1920 budgets. The out-of-city placements budget has increased by 612,000 compared to 2019-20 as a result of the increase in numbers that we've seen during this financial year. Likewise, we've increased the post-16 budget by an increase of £200,000 due to the volume of students that the budget has to support. The hospital and medical education budgets is really staying the same, apart from another £12,000 in there to help support a pilot of robots for special educational needs. And the early years complex needs inclusion budget, which was new in 1920, and we weren't sure of the demands, that has seen a huge response for support from that budget, and so we're increasing it by 148,000 next year, which is partly because the 1920 budget was for part year, whereas next year is a full year. The paper also includes proposals for a SEND hub for a pilot of 2 years, which should reduce the cost to the high needs block DSG and also improve outcomes, and this pilot will be kept under review. And finally, other high needs budgets have been increased to cover inflationary pressures so that they can also be met within the high needs block DSG. In terms of the early years dedicated schools grant, the government gave us an additional 8p per hour for 2 and also the 3 and 4 year olds. And we have looked to try and allocate as much of that funding as possible to the providers, and we've done that after consultation. So the proposals are that we will increase the rate to providers by 8p for the 2 year olds, but we do need to try and keep the contingency for the 3 and 4 year olds. So we're trying to keep 1p back to allow for the increase in cost per hour, but give the providers 7p per hour. So that sort of summarises what's in the budgets. So the recommendations, which are detailed in section 2, are as follows. It's to approve the initial determination of the school's budget for 2021 as set out in Appendix 1. To approve the 2021 special school inclusion centre and alternative provision places as set out in Appendix 2, and to approve the Element 3 top-up rates for the Harbour special school inclusion centres and alternative provision settings as set out in Appendix 3. It's to approve the Senate Academies Trust proposal to increase their 2021 Element 3 top-up rates by an increase of 1.84%, as set out in Appendix 4. It's to approve the proposal that any carry-forward balances from 2019-20 DSG can be used to assist with the continued introduction of funding reform changes and fund any potential financial pressures arising during 2021. And finally, to approve the local funding arrangements in respect to the 2 and the 3 and 4 year old early years provisions for 2021 as set out in the appendix, which is an increase of 8p per hour for 2 year old rates and 7p out of the 8p for the 3 and 4 year old rates.
Thank you, Angela. Are there any questions, first of all? Yeah.
The early years block hourly fund, is that set by central government?
Yeah.
Sorry, do you want me to
Yeah.
go on? We get funded on an hourly rate by central government. What we then do is we agree how we then split that funding out to pass on to providers and how much we keep for the inclusion fund and any contingency that's required.
Thank you, that makes sense.
Any other comments or questions? I think it's probably worth. Oh, do you want to say something?
I was just going to say about the SEND hub. Look, sounds like a fantastic idea.
Yeah.
I have a daughter who has some SEND issues, so anything to smooth things over with that is fantastic news.
Yeah, that's really good, and I think that pilot is going to be really interesting to see how what impact it has. So we should be looking at that. I think the comment I was going to make is that this has gone through Schools Forum in great detail. So I don't think you were at the last Schools Forum, were you? But I know you've been at them before, Tom, and it's been gone through with great detail. So there's probably not a lot more to say here, but it's. It has been discussed at great length. So, I suppose I will read these out just to make sure that what we're approving is the initial determination of the school's budget for 2021, the 2021 Special School Inclusion Centre and Alternative Provision Places, the 2021 Element 3 top-up rates for the Harbour Special School Inclusion Centres, including the addition of an Element 3 top-up at Trafalgar Inclusion Centre, and alternative provision settings. The Solent Academies Trust proposal to increase the 2021 Element 3 top-up rates for Solent Academies Trust to include an increase of 1.84% as set out in that appendix, and approve the proposal that any carry-forward balances from 2019-20 are used to assist with the continued introduction of the funding reform changes and fund any potential financial pressures arising during 2021. And finally, approve the local funding arrangements in respect of the 2-, 3- and 4-year-old early years provision for 2021 as set out in Section 7 and Appendix 5. To do that. Thank you very much for all that. Now you can rush off and report it to the DFE. Thank you. Okay, without further ado, let's do item 4, which is home to school transport, which is a consultation on the policy for 2021. Julia.
Thank you. So, yes, we're seeking approval to consult on the revised Portsmouth travel assistance policies for children of statutory school age and also post-16 learners. And the revised draft policies are attached in the appendices at the end of the report. Also, we're recommending that there's delegated responsibility to the Director of Children's Services for finalising and updating the policies, taking account of feedback during the consultation period, and that the Cabinet member notes the proposed approach to the commissioning of home to school transport, which will be implemented fully from September. So just in terms of background and rationale, actually this came from young people. So we carry out a survey with young people every year, young people with special needs and disabilities. One of the things that they always tell us every year is that travelling independently is really important to them in terms of life skills and skills to enable them to move on to adulthood. And that what they wanted was, as part of the education offer to them, to be able to learn to travel independently. So it's really in response to that request from young people that we decided to take a look at our travel assistance policy to see whether it was facilitating that development of independent skills. And we feel that there's more that we could do to facilitate independence for young people. So in the new policies, we're not proposing any changes to the eligibility criteria. So children and young people who are currently eligible, if they have a statutory entitlement to home to school travel assistance, will still be eligible under the revised policy. But we are making some we're proposing to make some changes to make the guidance clearer and easier for parents and carers to understand. So one of those changes will be to separate out the policy for statutory school-age children from the policy for post-16 learners, whereas previously those had been included within the same document, which we felt was quite confusing, potentially. So just to reiterate again, we're not proposing any changes to the criteria that we use to determine whether children and young people are eligible for travel assistance. And we're not proposing any changes to our interpretation of the statutory guidance. We're not proposing any changes to the criteria we use to assess children under the exceptional circumstances category for children who don't have a statutory entitlement but who apply under those exceptional circumstances criteria. So the key changes really are in terms of how travel assistance will be delivered. And what we want is to make sure that the way we're delivering travel assistance promotes independence for young people as part of our offer to them, to enable them to develop those independence skills. That will obviously be different for individual children and young people, so it will be very much assessed at an individual level in terms of moving them on to the next step, if you like, to be able to travel independently, because we recognise that not all children will be able to travel with a bus pass, for example, but some children will be able to work towards that over time. And we feel that's a really important part. So for some children, they will still need to be transported to school, but what we want to do is to use that opportunity over their time at school to enable them to develop some of those independent travel skills. As it says in 3.9, we're not proposing to make any changes to the charges that we currently make to those parents who do pay. So the charges are set out there in terms of privileged places. So for some children, they don't have an eligibility for travel assistance, but parents can choose to purchase a privileged place where places are available. So we're not proposing to make any increases to those charges. As I say, the draft policies are set out in the appendices at the end, and already quite a lot of work has taken place with stakeholders, which are listed in 3.10, including with parents and young people, because, as you're aware, we commission Portsmouth Parent Voice to work with us to enable parents to engage in co-production with us, and also Dynamite the Young People's co-production group. So we've already had discussions with both of those in terms of developing the proposed policies. We would like the consultation to run from 2nd of March to the 24th of April, but obviously due to PERDA and the need to confirm the policy so that applications can be made and assessments carried out ready for transport to be in place before the start of the new school year. Exactly. That's why we're suggesting that there's delegated authority to the Director of Children's Services to make that, to finalise the policy with the feedback from the consultation. In 3.12, I've just highlighted two aspects of the policy that we feel are not very clear in the current documentation, and we would like to make sure are further clarified. So first of all, children who are not yet of statutory school age. So there are a small number of children who there's no statutory requirement that we provide travel assistance until they reach statutory school age. They can apply if there are exceptional circumstances under our existing criteria, and certainly any children where travel assistance has already been agreed, we won't be removing that, so that will continue. But we want to make it really clear that from September, any new applications will be considered, could be considered under the criteria, but only once children reach statutory school age, and that the exceptional circumstances criteria, it would just be in the year before they reach statutory school age, so we wouldn't be accepting applications for younger children. Again, it's a point of clarification really in terms of the guidance. The second point of guidance is for children who are, so for children who are aged 8, the statutory distance from school, so this is not something that's locally determined, the statutory distance from school changes at the age of 8. So currently what we do is continue to provide travel assistance to the end of the school year, where the child turns 8. We wouldn't want to remove it on the day of the 8th birthday. That would seem not reasonable. So what we are proposing is that we continue to offer that until the end of the term after the child has turned 8, and then we give parents the option of purchasing a privileged place or contributing towards a privileged place if there's one available to the end of the school year following that. So those are just 2 points of clarification where we feel the current policy doesn't really clarify those sufficiently. The final changes in terms of the commissioning of homeschool transport.
So alongside the revised policy, what we hope with the way that this is implemented and the discussion with children and families about how they travel to school is that those might change more regularly than they had done in the past if it's part of the annual review. And therefore, we need to make sure that where we are commissioning transport, we're able to do that in a more responsive way as needs change. So we're working with a company called Adam on introducing a new dynamic purchasing system to make it easier to put out the minibus routes, the taxi routes, to make sure that as part of that we've got really clear information that the drivers are suitably qualified, DBS checked, all of those things are in place, and also to make sure that we get back from that better management information about the costs of routes and how those work to help us actually plan a bit better. So the two things fit together. The update of the policy will mean we're expecting that there's more change in the way that children are travelling to school as they're able to travel more independently, and then we can use those changes to commission transport more effectively that meets the needs as they change.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Thank you both. Questions, comments? Pretty straightforward. It came to the original decision came to the previous decision-making meeting. This is just the how it's going to be done. Yeah, the consultation. Anyone else want to make any comments? I think it's very straightforward. I have one question, if you don't mind. The 8th birthday thing. So I understand the logic of what you're saying, and that you don't stop it on the 8th birthday. They switch category. So would they be entitled to apply for under the over age 8 category?
So it's the distance from school changes.
Oh, I see. So when they get to 8, yes, oh, of course, yes, I get it.
Nothing else can change.
Yeah.
They're still living in the same house, but there has to. So yes, the distance from home to school changes. So everything could be the same. They're living in the same house, same circumstances, but once they reach 8, the statutory guidance is that they should be able to walk for a longer distance to get to school.
I get it.
And just to add, this is a very small number because obviously in Portsmouth, most children are close to their nearest school. So whereas in Hampshire or some of the other big counties, this is quite a big chunk of their budget.
Yeah, I was just curious
in Portsmouth,
as to why
it's very small. Yeah.
I just was curious.
Yeah, so it's the statutory guidance. So it's about the expectation of how
an 8-year-old
can walk to school.
A bit like all other age-related expectations. Yes. So it's a bit bonkers sometimes when you look at them. But anyway, okay, thanks for explaining that. I think that's quite straightforward then. So I will agree to the consultation on the revised Portsmouth travel assistance policies for children of statutory school age and post-16 learners. The revised draft policies and consultation letter as detailed in appendices 2 to 4. And I think it's very sensible. I don't think people often realise how long a lead-in time is to do something for September, so I think it's completely sensible to take into account of what PERDA could do in not interrupting that. So I'm happy to delegate to the Director of Children's, Families and Education responsibility for finalising the updated policies, taking account of feedback during that consultation period. And finally, note the proposed approach to the commissioning of home-to-school transport where provided, which will be implemented fully from the 1st of September, 2020, which will come around very quickly. But I think overall, it's, we know it's a very big budget pressure, but actually what's really nice about this is that the move to looking at it has come from those young people in that co-production, which is really positive all round. So thank you very much for all your work on that, and that is the end of the meeting, I believe.